What's going on, everybody? Appreciate you for tuning in. The unofficial second half of the NBA season kicks off Thursday night. As the time of recording this, I believe what Pistons Knicks just started, but All Star Weekend, big success for the league, except the dunk contest, which it'll take way too long to really kind of deep dive into that, but um, it's the same issues with the dunk contest. We don't have any of the big names that want to do it. Blah blah blah. The dunks themselves just aren't hitting. Whatever. NBC reportedly pushing the league for a 1v1 or a 2v2 tournament. There's been some rumblings around that. Jaylen Brown was asked about it. He said set it up. I think Harden and a couple of other guys have said they'd be interested. So there could be some traction there. 3-point contest, I feel like basically we already have some rumors about next year. Dame, Steph, Clay, Booker all being in it. So once again, the 3-point contest will be electrifying. The All-Star game with the new format was a big success, big hit. We saw guys trying. That's all in the rearview mirror now. We're now into the second half where most of these teams have like 30 games, 29 games to play. Now we're kind of getting into that sprint part of the schedule where, if you're, 5-6 games back, you're kind of running out of time to make up that ground. Teams that are in the play-in situation right now, you now have to try to make a move up to the top 6. So with that, there's some storylines for the second half of the season that I will be watching. I believe I have about 7, and then I just kept thinking about more and more. So I'm just going to use some honorable mentions because I do think there's actually a lot of meat on the bone of the NBA season still. But first off, I want to talk about the Pistons. Can they finish the race? They are the number 1 seed in the East right now. They've been not necessarily like a pleasant surprise because I think we all were seeing kind of the seeds being planted for the Pistons to be really good eventually one of these years, and this just happened to be that year. They have a 5.5 game lead up on Boston in the East. The Knicks are right there and some other teams. Out of the break, they have the Knicks. They play the Spurs twice. They play the Cavs twice. They have to play the Thunder in like their first 10 games out of the break. So they're going to have some tough tests. We'll see how they do. My not necessarily biggest drawback, but when I watch the Pistons, for whatever reason, I kind of get this Cavs-like worry about them because they are kind of Cade Cunningham dependent a little bit. So I just want to see if they can find consistent secondary scoring, whether it is Duncan Robinson off the bench or Tobias Harris or they have like Amin Thompson, who's not really much of a scorer, but can they somehow take some pressure off of Cade? Now, the difference between, I guess, Cleveland and Detroit when looking at them, if Detroit's offense kind of gets bogged down to people watching Cade is bigger and stronger than Donovan Mitchell. So it's easier for Cade to kind of put the ball on the deck, get to the hoop, and physically force his way to the rim. Whereas Mitchell's a little bit harder. So, not to necessarily put them both in the same boat. It's just something I kind of see sometimes in Detroit. But I do think they're legit. Cade's having a great season. Second one. I guess we have to kind of watch this Houston Rockets situation with the whole burner account thing. Whether you believe it's Kevin Durant or you don't, it's still lingering. And until we kind of get Kevin Durant to be like vehemently out there saying it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. He addressed it over All-Star break. All he said was it's Twitter nonsense and my team knows who I am. So didn't really, pour water on that fire. But look, you take him on his word. The team knows who he is. I guess it's going to be a non-story. But the more burner accounts are already linked to KD, so this came from a burner account, it's going to be linked to KD. If they lose, go on a little bit of a low losing streak, people are going to be referring back to it, because the problem is the burner account did reference a couple of guys that are on his current team, as well as players from past teams he was on, which is why the link is kind of there in public opinion. But the Rockets are 33-20. They were kind of one of those picks early in the year, looking at the talent they have. But they're fourth in the West. They're a little bit off the pace. And coming out of the break, they have the Hornets, which won't be necessarily an easy game, but Jazz, Kings, Magic, Heat, Wizards, and Blazers. So they could go on a bit of a run to climb up a few spots if they, if this whole thing hasn't caused like division in the locker room. The thing I'm looking at with them is their lack of a point guard. I guess outside of the project that is Reed Shepherd, does that ultimately hold them back this season? And will we see certain games in the second half where you'll be like, if they only had a legit point guard, they could have won that game? And the way the West is, you go on a week or so, and you have a bad week or so, look, you could drop. And not to say they'll drop out of the top 6 or anything like that, but, when you're jockeying for matchups and all that, it is something to watch. Talked about Cleveland briefly earlier, but now we'll get into more of a sample size of the Cavs with Harden. He's played, 3 games before the break. He's averaging 19, 9, and 5 for them, which I feel like you'll take that if you're a Cavs fan. The Cavs are 34-21. They're 4th in the East. Out of the break, they have actually they have a bit of a tough schedule right out of the break. They face the Hornets, the Thunder, the Knicks, Pistons twice, the Celtics, and the Sixers. So with some of those East teams, they're facing teams that are right around them, so they can make up some room, or they could fall back. And then we'll see with the Thunder, how they match up. I think with Cleveland, it's more so playoff-wise with them. Like, they are very talented, so we are going to expect them to be in the top 6. Like, there's nothing there. But they've kind of been this for the past couple of years. And now we'll get to see if the Harden for Garland swap leads them any deeper into the playoffs. Garland's issues were either being hurt during the playoff run or just not being available. Harden's issues are well documented in the playoffs. But, his skill set, we'll see if it's more of a fit and kind of offsetting pressure on Donovan Mitchell. That's where the Cavs kind of stalled the past couple of years. Offense gets bogged down. Mitchell tries to do it himself. And, better teams can kind of defend against that. Next, got to talk about the Hornets. Is there a scenario where the Hornets could sneak into the top 6? Which, if they're able to do that, what a story they would be. And, LaMelo Ball, reportedly uninjured in an accident that he had, which, once again, you're a Hornets fan, you like that. But that's kind of a common thing, or it's becoming too occurring for me. LaMelo Ball, car accidents, I guess. Something to watch, maybe. But either way, 26-29, they're 9th in the East. Now, out of the break, they have the Wizards, the Bulls, Pacers, Blazers twice, the Mavs, the Heat, and the Kings. Those are teams that if this kind of run that they've been on is legit, they could kind of, get some wins in there. They should be able to, be above 500, and then put some pressure on the bottom of the top six, where you have like the Raptors and the Sixers right now. I think a lot of people are looking at the Raptors position as a top six team and wondering, is that where maybe the Hornets could flip flop with them and be a top six team because of the run that they're on, with their group playing so well right now. Like I said, this sprint part, if they kind of take that schedule that they have there and really feast on some of the, mid lower tier teams, why not? So that's definitely something I'm keeping my eye on. Obviously, the one thing to watch with them being so young, as we get deeper into this regular season, the pressure kind of gets dialed up a bit more. Will they be ready for that and equipped to deal with it? But that's something we won't know until they actually experience it. So that's some weeks off. But look, they're playing well right now. They're fun to watch. And at least in that Eastern play-in group with like them, the Heat, the Hawks, Bulls, that group, Hornets are playing the best basketball right now. Next, the MVP race, I think is going to be an interesting storyline for the second half. Right now, it's with the whole 65 game thing, we're seeing big names coming off the board. Oddly enough, it seems like most of them are like the West guys. So maybe this is a Eastern Conference MVP type of year. And if that's the case, I'm looking at Jaylen Brown and what he's done with the Celtics. I'm looking at Cade Cunningham, what he's doing with the Pistons. Those would kind of be the two guys that come to my mind right away. Now, if there is somebody else, you let me know. I know because he plays in New York, Jalen Brunson is going to be thrown in those conversations. He deserves credit for what the Knicks are doing, obviously. I just think, I don't know if his resume for this season can compete with Brown and Cunningham. That's just me. You let me know if you disagree with that. But I do think that race becomes very interesting, especially dealing with Brown and Cunningham with the top two teams in the East. Who can, maybe it turns into whoever gets the number one seed. That's who takes it. I don't know. But I think it's going to be fun seeing those two battling for position in the MVP, like on the MVP ladder. Next up, the buyout market. Now's about the time where the buyout market really takes focus. And I'm looking at some of the teams that maybe weren't as active during the trade deadline. Do they maybe find a gem on the buyout market to really help elevate their situation? Like we just mentioned, Rockets in their point guard situation. Do they find somebody in the buyout market? The Lakers, I feel like they could use the services of like a legit 3-and-D wing. And like when I say legit, like an actual wing who can play defense effectively on one end and actually knock down the three consistently on the offensive end. The Heat didn't really do anything. So if they want to climb out of the play-in, they probably need to find a shot creator on the buyout market. And there's some other teams in there as well. But, we'll see if somebody gets that buyout market find that really turns their season around here in the second half. Next one. Can the Spurs catch the Thunder and be the number one seed in the West? I think if you're a good team, necessarily being the number one seed isn't like the end-all, be-all of it, but it's an interesting race to see, especially when you look at the regular season and how the Spurs have played against the Thunder. If it did come down to a Western Conference Finals between the two of them, a Game 7 scenario being down in Oklahoma City versus San Antonio, that could be an interesting swing. So I think both teams will go for it, obviously. The Thunder have been dealing with some injuries lately. The Thunder, what are they? 3 games up on the Spurs right now. The Spurs are on a 6-game streak, so they're playing really well. Coming out of the break, they have the Pistons twice, the Knicks, the Sixers, the Clippers, which Clippers aren't a great team, but they're playing much better with Kawhi kind of going off. As long as he's got gas in the tank, we'll kind of see what the Clippers do. But Rockets and then the Celtics. Some tests in there, you know. Well, we'll see what the Spurs are coming out of the All-Star break. If they can keep putting some pressure on the Thunder. Thing to watch, could be the deepest team in the league, but a lot of those guys are unproven, and we won't see who they are until we finally see them in some of these situations, and if these guys can step up to the plate, close that 3-game gap, and potentially be the 1 seed. So those are like 7 that came off the top of my head really quickly, but there's some honorable mentions. One, I want to see this whole tanking thing. You know, Silver's talked about like there's some measures that they're thinking about putting in place for as early as next season. I'm assuming we would hear about that at some point in the second half. I would love to know what those measures are. Part of me thinks it's something about draft picks, maybe protecting picks, all that kind of stuff. I don't think it's something way too drastic. I just think it's going to be some little thing here or there. I guess at some point in the second half, we'll probably hear about expansion, maybe. I don't know. Which isn't necessarily like a big storyline, because I feel like when the league announces they're going to expand, the assumption is it's Seattle and Vegas. But you never know. Even though that's going to be something that's be like a couple of years down the road. More so on the court, the Rookie of the Year race, Con Canopal versus Cooper Flagg. I think it's a tight race, and part of me has been wondering, the Hornets' ascension, will that push the race more so to Con Canopal? Because that means Con Canopal who is a big part of the rotation with the Hornets, will be playing in more meaningful games with the Hornets. And if his stat line kind of stays steady or even increases, it could be hard for some people not to give him Rookie of the Year over, yes, Cooper Flagg is a great player, but the Mavericks are not a good team right now. And they are basically they're already looking ahead to next season. So they're not, looking to improve their positioning in the Western Conference standings by any means. So I think it's going to be fascinating how that plays out. Are the Sixers flying under the radar as a 6th seed? And I guess what that is, if Embiid stays healthy, what state they're in when Paul George comes back. You got Maxey, you got Edgecombe. Could this be the year that they finally make some noise in the playoffs? I don't know, but I think it is something to think about, only because of the development of Maxey and Edgecombe, and the fact that Embiid isn't the sole focus. Could that lead to him finally being healthy? I don't know. The Suns are overachieving. They're 7th in the West. Could they be a top 6 team? That's something to look for. And how far can Curry kind of drag the Warriors? Like, they're 29-26. I know they face off against the Celtics late Thursday night. Curry's ruled out, but they are getting Porzingis for the first time. So we'll see Porzingis against former team in the Celtics. But yeah, it's still going to come down to Steph Curry as to how far, the Warriors can go. Those are just some. Like I said, there's like plenty more you could actually come up with. I talk about the Lakers in the buyout market, but, everybody's in awe of, LeBron and but his age 41 or whatever season. How much gas in the tank will he have at the end of the season? That's something to watch. How that could affect where the Lakers finish. Look, the Clippers, who I said they're down to just Kawhi, but they're playing their best basketball with him, as opposed to when they had him and Zubac and James Harden. So Are the Clippers going to be a feisty team at the bottom of the West? Do the Hawks have a run in them now without without Trae Young, and they're going like fully with young guys right now? Could they get back to the play that they had early in the season before Trae Young came back? And could they elevate themselves a little bit? So, like I said, there's many more that you probably could come up with, but those are just some storylines that I have kind of in my mind as the second half kicks off. So, appreciate you for tuning in. Look, if you made it all the way through, and if you didn't do so in the beginning, hit the like button, follow, subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment. Any feedback is welcome feedback from me. Even if you have a critique of the show, I want to hear from you. I really do. Give me your biggest storyline for the second half of the season in the comments. We could definitely talk about it. But yeah, appreciate you. I really do. Coming through. Give me a chance to take some time out of your day. But have plenty more coming. So next episode should probably be this weekend. Probably look more at the NBA. But if something else pops up, obviously, I will talk about it. Look, if you have a suggestion, you can leave that in the comments. You could join the show's Discord and drop, episode ideas in there as well. That's definitely welcomed there. Should be a link to the Discord in profile. If not, you can leave a message asking me about the Discord, and I'll put the link in the comments. So, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe. God bless. And until I talk to you next time, I'm out of here. All right? Bye.